The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
All right, we are back. We are the IndySiders. Big, sexy Harry Broadhurst, the Heartbreak Kid, Mark Radulich, and we are here to tell you to suck it. We are here to bring you. We are here to bring you the best in pro wrestling chatterboxes. How you doing tonight, Harry?
Or the worst, depending on the show we cover.
Or depending on your point of view about us personally. But
I mean, I may not be everybody's cup of tea, but I'm definitely somebody's shot of whiskey, right?
Indeed. I don't know. I don't know how many people of your friends of like the diehard wrestling ilk watch this, but I have to imagine you poke less bears than I do.
Of the two of us, I am definitely the least controversial.
I will take that. Controversy creates cash, baby. Woo! Like this. I'm a Paul Heyman guy shirt tonight.
It's actually a really good book if you've never read it. It's in my wrestling library.
I don't think I did. I know I had it on my list of things to read. I don't hate Eric Bischoff. I think he did a lot of really good things. I think he had a lot of good ideas. I think he got done dirty by a corporation that wasn't so much into pro wrestling as it was into television ratings.
Well, I think the bigger problem is they saw the lights at the end of the tunnel in Vince Russo and thought that he was going to be their savior, and he ended up being the freight train coming WCW's way.
You know, everyone forgets that from what was it? It started in 1996, and then when was Sting versus Hogan?
96. Starrcade 97.
Yeah, so for about a year and a half, 2 years, if you factor in that Nitro wasn't great in the beginning, but it certainly made a splash at a time that the WWE was floundering. I mean,
yeah,
he had a solid run there for a while.
And people forget that the early episodes of Nitro were trading wins with Monday Night Raw in the ratings before they went on the run that led to the episode title for Bischoff's podcast, 83 Weeks, right, which would have been May of 96 with the start of the New World Order, going all the way up until roughly around the time Tyson shows up in the WWF.
Yeah, I don't have as much bad to say about Eric Bischoff as I do about Vince, for obvious reasons, or Vince Russo for that matter, because I don't think Vince Russo is as talented as he was made out to be. I think he injected some life into a product that desperately needed it, but he also needed a lot of control. Whereas Eric Bischoff, I don't care so much about the creative stuff. I think he had some foresight that at the time was sorely missing in wrestling. Again, I think if the AOL Time Warner merger doesn't happen, and I think the company, like if you hear the stories from 83 Weeks, I used to listen to that podcast. If you hear Eric Bischoff talk about the way the balance sheets worked in that company, where there were streams of revenue that didn't go back into the company, it went into other portions of other portions of Time Warner, not Time Warner, of
AOL.
Yeah. No, of the original company before they merged.
CNN.
Yeah. Yeah. like they were making money in areas that they didn't see profit from, because like I think the one example that he gave was they had an entire line of home videos which sold fairly well at a time where home videos were selling well, and that's a stream of revenue that only went back into, I think, like the Turner television department, or like the home video department, which was its own thing.
Turner Home Media.
Yeah. So, like, you can't run a business like that. If here at the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, if we start selling T-shirts, but the profits all go back into, my left ass T-shirt company, well, how does that help me? So, like, I could see where, like, he had an uphill struggle there, and people tend to focus solely on the good or bad of the creative, as if that's the only job. It's not the only job.
Well, kind of going back to what you were saying too, and then we'll actually get into the current news and notes that we're here to discuss. But
Harry, let's talk about this for an hour.
I mean, you sit here and say that like I couldn't do this, but anyways, going back into what you were just saying there, even towards the dying days of WCW with the cancellation of television there, if television doesn't get canceled, Bischoff buys the company with Fuchsia Media. And who knows what the game plan ends up being, where WCW does or doesn't go from there. Obviously, we never see anything with relations to the invasion, but there were so many of WCW's main stars that were still under extended contracts there that I do think that with a mind like Bischoff's and with a hopefully younger roster as well at the forefront, WCW was starting to turn the corner in late 2000s, early 2001 before the hammer fell, courtesy of Jamie Kellner.
I think if I was advising Bischoff at the time, I think the one mistake that's solely on him, and him not really understanding the nature of what he had. When Bischoff got the idea, which when the WWE does it, they do it the right way. And let me explain what I mean by that. When he had the idea that the NWO should be its own product, they should have their own television show, their own merchandise, their own pay-per-views. He had the right idea, but not with your faction, your heel faction that is the main part of your storyline. The two problems with the NWO were there was no natural ending. Like, Sting Hogan should have been the end, and then you go into the NWO Civil War, and then it just dissipates entirely, and we never speak of the shortcut again. That's how it should have happened, and we would have been fine. When he started to do let's make it its own product, and the idea was like, you think that was going to be Thunder, or they were going to stay on Mondays and WCW was going to migrate to Thunder. I was like, doing what the WWE did with the draft, and and for a while, just having two distinct brands and trading guys like the Yankees and the Mets was the way to handle that. Doing that with your heel faction was not the way to handle that. They should have just independently created. Again, there's the Thunder wrestlers and the Nitro wrestlers, and have them
because we
compete.
And we kind of saw that in a modern context as well with AEW, because for a while there you had two separate brands in AEW as well, with Dynamite and Collision. You had wrestlers that would only appear on one or the other, not both. And I do think that that's something with a talent roster as deep as AEW has is desperately missing from that company, just because it would allow you to get more semblance of who the marquee players are on each event, even if each show only has 2 hours every week.
I mean, do you remember when they had created forced scarcity on both SmackDown and Raw, and guys like Brian Kendrick got in the main event?
The Kendrick one was the Champions Challenge thing. I know the match because it was it was at Unforgiven in 2009.
Right, he was feuding with Triple H at the time, at the top of his game. And then over on Raw, you had matches like Jeff Hardy versus The Undertaker, which, would Jeff Hardy have gotten that kind of time had they continued to have, top guys on both brands? Maybe, but he definitely had a better opportunity to do so once there was forced scarcity on Raw.
No, I think the brand split definitely helped force the hand to make more main eventers, some of whom worked out, obviously, some of whom did not. But you could make the argument that without the brand split in 2002 happening, guys like Edge, guys like Eddie Guerrero, guys like Though we don't look back on him fondly now, guys like Chris Benoit never sniffed the main event scene in the WWE.
Right. All right. So it's always fun to go back down memory lane, but let's talk about modern times. So because I was telling you before the show started tonight that I quit my job and I got a new job and I work from home now, and I'm in training working from home. So I've been able to catch up on Raw because it's available on, it streams on Netflix and then I can watch it the next day. So I watched it on Tuesday. I watched the entire broadcast for the first time in years, and instead of just clips on Raw. I had seen the clips actually before I saw the full broadcast. So it's part of the reason that made me want to watch it in the first place. Paul Heyman, as the kids say, crashing out on Jey Uso was all over TikTok. Like it's like the same thing with John Cena's initial heel promo. As soon as it happened, it got cut and immediately made into a caption on TikTok that everybody is now using as a sound. It's fucking hilarious. My favorite ones are the ones that go, my toxic ex. And it's just like, I'm always the asshole. I'm always the liar. Not this time. I'm right. Like, there's so many people using that to talk about like ex-girlfriends or boyfriends or, toxic mothers. What a time we live in, Harry. What a time we live in. But enough about my obsession with TikTok. That is, I have to tell you, and we're going to talk about the Becky Lynch promo in a little bit, but let's stay focused on Paul. If nothing else, the promo work on Raw over the last 6 months has been some of the best I've seen in wrestling in years. Like one banger after another.
No, I agree. I think a lot of it has to do with more creative freedom being involved as well. Now that the dictator who shall not be named is no longer involved, I think that you're starting to see more and more people get an opportunity to be comfortable in who they are as their respective characters. You saw Drew killing it with his social media troll, turn to real life troll stuff that he's doing. Mm-hmm. Punk has been killing it since his return to the company. Seth has been doing some of the best promo work of his career, and the stuff with Seth Rollins and Sami Zayn last week on Raw was phenomenal as well.
Oh, absolutely. Even the Logan Paul promo where he
Logan is an underrated talker.
Yeah, I like Logan more as a talker than I do as a wrestler. But staying with Paul, just to back up your point, and then I'll move on with Paul. The style of promo was always, it's going as far back as to when they first started doing televised promos to sell matches. Here are your bullet points. Put the match over. Tell people, where the match is going to be so that we can sell tickets to this thing. It's the whole point of a promo in the first place. Here, tell them where the match is. Here's why you're fighting. Here's your motivation. Go talk. And then Ric Flair goes out there and says, my watch costs more than your fucking house, or whatever the hell he said. Dusty, here's put over the match. Here's your bullet points. And he goes out there and does hard times. For years, that's the way the WWE operated. Hulk Hogan would go out there. The Warrior's promos were unintelligible, but Savage would go out there. Everybody would go out there with a handful of ideas in their head of what it was they were supposed to get over, get across, and they just filled in the blanks. And then we went into this era of
the script writer,
the entirely scripted promo, because Vince couldn't get out of this idea of we're shooting movies, pal. And some guys who are not extemporaneous speakers, and I don't know if you know this or not, Harry, you may have heard this about me. It's well known, but maybe you haven't heard. I do a podcast that requires a certain degree of extemporaneous speaking. And some people are great at this, and some people need a little help. So some people, as it's been said, liked the scripted promo. Other people really struggled with it. And now you're going to see like the best extemporaneous speakers really rise to the top. And boy, who better than Canyon? Also, who better than Paul Heyman in the extemporaneous speaking department? Because every time he opens his mouth, he says something that is believable, genuine, and genius, as was this promo against Jey Uso tonight on Monday.
I think the thing with Paul Heyman, and obviously we'll need to move on here shortly, but I think the thing with Paul Heyman is Paul Heyman grew up as a wrestling fan in the pro wrestling business, not in the sports entertainment business. So Paul Heyman still views this the way of the old school style of pro wrestling, that your job literally as a manager, as a wrestler, as a valet, as whatever it is to talk people into the building, to get them to buy tickets, to get them to pay to see TV, to pay to come to live events, to get them to pay to watch the pay-per-views, or to get them to put down the money for a Netflix subscription or for a cable subscription to watch USA Network in order to see SmackDown. Paul Heyman is a master of the money promo. He talks about this when he did his Inside the Ropes interview. He has a conversation. I don't know if you remember the Invasion conversation that he has where he just rips Vince apart at the end of the Invasion right before Survivor Series.
Dude, my children, especially my daughter is a musical theater kid, and she's had to do auditions. And so I've sat with her and I taught her the art of the monologue and the monologue for audition. And I said, if you want to know how to do it right, and I've shown her the night before Survivor Series SmackDown promo. It's genius. It's one of the best promos in the history of wrestling. People love to talk about the pipe bomb. Paul Heyman's speech against Vince was so much better.
And Heyman's asked the story about how that came to be. Heyman says that Vince came up to him and said, "I'm going to give you the microphone. I want you to clear your mind." It's and Heyman looks at him.
Air your grievances is the phrase that was used.
And Heyman says, "Are you sure?" And then
make me money, pal.
And the Michael Hayes comment there, "You want a new asshole? Paul E will rip it yay fucking wide."
Yeah. You know what you're talking about there, and it links to this promo with Jey Uso. The genius of Paul Heyman is taking a kernel of truth and just expanding on it, expounding. The night before Survivor Series, he really was airing his grievances about how he felt like, and God, I know how he feels, that you have this really special genius, avant-garde, ahead of the curve thing, and somebody who has better resources and better marketers takes it and makes it a $1 million idea, and you're left standing in the curb with your pockets hanging out going, but that was mine. And it's like, well, you're sorry, all's fair in love and capitalism. I've been there. This promo with Jey Uso cut from the same cloth, because Jey Uso starts with, after what you did to my family. And the reason why this promo was so good was because you could truly believe Paul Heyman reacting that way. Are you fucking kidding me? When Roman Reigns came back after,
didn't you turn your back on Roman before I did?
When Roman Reigns came back from, I think it was cancer, he wasn't a main eventer. He was kind of irrelevant, and it's because of Paul Heyman he became the tribal chief and was WWE champion for 4 years or some shit. Paul Heyman's like, what do you think he did that on his own? You ungrateful pieces of shit. It's great. And so Paul Heyman, and because also Paul Heyman has had to sit through years of ECW guys coming out and saying Paulie tricked them, Paulie lied to them. I mean, my God, guys going on podcasts, fucking Jerry Lawler saying that shit, Bruce
Pritchard.
Thank you. Every other Bruce in the world came to my head. Pritchard, Eric Bischoff, who also struggles with. I love you. Also struggles with the truth. And all of these guys have painted Jim Cornette. All of these people have painted Paul Heyman as the devil. And he's just carried it for years. And then there's this punk ass dumbass, saying you betrayed my family, and he fucking snaps. He snapped, and that's why he's saying, that's the context of that. That's why he's saying I'm always the liar. I'm always the cheat. I'm always the scumbag. Not this time. I'm in the right. I didn't do anything wrong here. I wanted to walk to the ring with my friend, and your asshole cousin shoves me to the ground. Your asshole cousin who left me to fend for myself against Jacob Vatu and the Tongans who put me through a table. Go fuck yourself, pal. And I'm like, oh, Paul.
Well, too, the other thing as well, him calling out Jay about him, saying when Jay said that he had turned against his family, Heyman looking at him and basically calling his bluff, didn't you turn against Roman first, jackass?
Right. Yeah, the best promos always come from a place of truth, and I know you want to move on, and I want to talk about Becky Lynch, but that was another number one with a bullet for me. What a great promo!
Well, speaking of Becky Lynch, let's go ahead and segue into that there. You know who actually impressed me so far? I think Lyra is actually coming out of this looking like a star more so than Becky is.
Okay. I keyed more into Becky's promo, so let's talk about that so people know what we're talking about. So Becky Lynch comes out. This is after she's already turned on Lyra. She comes out and addresses the kind of does the John Cena thing of why, but why Becky, why? And she says, I took out the garbage, and it's so funny because there's been a clip that's been floating around on YouTube and TikTok about Bayley. And I think you and I talked about it maybe last show. She's considering walking away from the business because she sort of hit this point of no matter how good I do, no matter how loyal I am, no matter how awesome I am, no matter how many tickets I sell, no matter how many kids I hug and kiss, I'll never be seen by this company as more valuable than Becky or Charlotte. And she is 110% right about that. And she knows that and she owns that. And she's like, okay, well, there's nowhere else left for me to go. She's kind of in the Scott Hall position in, end of 95 going into 96 of if I can't better my position here, what am I still doing here?
Well, I think we had this conversation last time, and my statement on that was simple. There of the four horsewomen, I think Bayley's the best of the four.
Again, in many ways, I agree with you, but it doesn't really matter what you and I think. It matters what the company thinks.
And what the people that are spending the money think. And unfortunately, the people that are spending the money don't view Bayley the same way that they viewed Sasha or that they view Becky and Charlotte.
Right. So there's Becky, and that was the whole point of her promo. She says it in a very mean, toxic, kind of funny to me way. She was just like Bayley was supposed to be in the match, and they took Bayley out to put me in because Bayley is garbage, and I fucking laughed. I was like, because I love truth, Harry. I love truth.
Poor Bayley.
Truth is the best thing ever, and I don't care how much it hurts. I just don't. And so she's sitting there going, they took Bayley out of the match and put me in, and people and women cried as I came to the ring, and I was like, damn,
they showed
fucking hurts, man.
They showed a woman in the crowd tearing up when Becky's music hit.
I brought that up with Robert. God only knows if people have heard me say it, given what I had to suffer through on that podcast. But yeah, I brought it up that night. Like, people were so happy to see Becky come back; they were crying in the audience. But it was like when CM Punk came back when he came back in AEW, men and women and children crying in the audience like they'd won the lottery. Anyway, so Becky's like, you all cheered me and you could care less that she was out of the match because Becky's garbage. Why would you? And then she's like, so I took out the garbage. And you said, yay, thanks for taking out the garbage. And then she turns on Lyra because Lyra isn't quite garbage. She's recycling, which I thought was a funny line. She's like, she's not as bad as Bayley, but she's still bad. And I took her out too because that's what I do. And I was like, you know what? I have to give Becky Lynch a lot of credit because, again, I think she was kind of given some bullet points, but basically she filled in the blanks. And that was a very Schadenfreude-laden promo of I'm going to laugh at these other people's misfortunes. And I couldn't help. It's weird. You're not supposed to cheer the bad guys, but I actually saw somebody on TikTok bring this up. The WWE's big problem right now is everyone's cheering the bad guys. And it's like, sorry, the bad guys are doing better promos than the good guys.
Well, I think the problem also now is that we've reached such a shades of gray era too when it comes to like merchandising and licensing and the ability to connect with superstars on a more personal level. You don't really have defined good guys and bad guys anymore.
Well, I think there used to be a thing of the bad guys wouldn't go out and do press. And
right. No, that was a Vinceism.
Yeah, and that was a thing of the past years ago. So, picture this. Dr. Doom fights the Fantastic Four, and he's kidnapping Franklin Richards, and he's, destroying the Thing, and he's putting out the Human Torch, and he's molesting the Invisible Woman. And oh my God, what a terrible, horrible thing Dr. Doom is. And we're at the verge of Secret Wars. He's going to blow the timeline up and everything with it. And then as soon as that's done, Dr. Doom goes on your favorite
Oprah.
radios. It goes on Oprah and goes, "Yeah, I'm not really like that. I'm playing a character here. Look, see, look how handsome I am." you, I understand wrestling not real, and this is what actors do. People play villains in movies, and then they go when they do press, they go, "I'm not really that person." But I will tell you this, and I said this a couple of weeks ago. Shay Tate and I reviewed Waitress the Musical. And the guy playing the villain in Waitress the Musical did such a great job when he came out for his final bow. People had to take a minute and go, oh, yay, good for you. You did great. But they hated him so much they didn't react to him at first. Like, oh, here comes this here comes the devil. You don't really get that with WWE anymore because as soon as the devil is done, the devil takes off his horns.
The issue with pro wrestling in general, and I think you see it much more on larger stages, because on independent shows, it harkens more back to the older style of pro wrestling, where heels are heels, baby faces are baby faces, and we kind of see that a little bit throughout the course of the show that we're going to cover here later tonight in Action Wrestling 7. When you're such a large company as the WWE is, and you're such a marketing machine, you have to have people doing the media in order to promote where you're going.
Right.
You have to have people doing the rounds socially in order to promote about all of the stuff that's upcoming for the company, as well as everything that's going to go forward there. Like Rhea missing this week's episode of Raw in order to be down in Australia to promote the upcoming Perth triple shot with SmackDown, Crown Jewel, and Raw coming from Australia later in the year. But you can't always do those kinds of promotions in character, because if you do those kinds of promotions in character, then you find yourself in a situation like Vader did in Kuwait, where he bitch slapped a reporter and ended up in prison. Or you find yourself in a situation like Dr. D. David Schultz did with John Stossel from 2020.
You don't even need to go as extreme as that, because every time the Undertaker did something, everyone wants to have fuck with the Undertaker, and then the Undertaker can't play back. People wanted to play with the Undertaker, and he couldn't play because he was a zombie wizard. He had to stay in gimmick the whole time. Yeah, exactly.
Spooky fingers. But real quick, back to the...
Yeah, go ahead.
Back to the Becky Lynch thing there. I want to talk about Lyra's progression over the last couple of weeks, because we haven't really seen Lyra talk much until she started doing the stuff with the Women's Intercontinental title, and now getting involved again with Becky Lynch, who she goes back to NXT with here. I think Lyra's really stepped her game up over the course of the last couple of weeks, and I've been really impressed by how she's performed in the promos there. She is 100% dropping the Intercontinental title to Becky at Backlash, but A, it should be a really good match. And B, I think having her in the ring, standing toe-to-toe with Becky for 15 to 20 minutes could help make her a future main eventer in the women's division in a lot of people's eyes.
Backlash is this Saturday, right?
This Saturday coming, yes. The 17th.
I will not be watching it live. I will be out naked swimming. But that's neither here nor there. All right, so speaking of naked swimming, tell me about the releases from WWE.
Cora Jade starting an OnlyFans.
See, people say my segues don't make any sense, but they totally do.
I can make any segue work. I've been doing the podcasting thing for years. I know how it works by this point.
All right, so speaking of how it works, tell me about Cora Jade's OnlyFans.
No content yet, because she's still technically getting paid by the company for another 30 days.
Okay, but she's her contract's being terminated.
Yeah, she was one of the NXT releases. So we'll start with the main roster releases. And then I'll go down them here. There's 6 people from the main roster. Or excuse me, 5 from the main roster. The rest are from NXT. The 5 people from the main roster are Braun Strowman, Shayna Baszler. To be fair, Braun hasn't really done anything of note since he's come back, except for put Bronson Reed over.
Didn't he also do a thing with Jacob Fatu?
Yes, where he put Jacob Fatu over.
Oh, super. Okay.
And when you're making as much money as Braun Strowman was making, using him as an enhancement talent isn't probably your most financially stable way to keep employment.
All right, let's take these one at a time, and we don't have to do 20 minutes on each one, but Braun Strowman to AEW or TNA, yes or no?
No. I think Strowman's done with wrestling for now, at least.
Did he save his money? Did he? Because I know like he was a strong man.
And I think he goes back into that world for a little bit too. He dips his toes back into like world's strongest man competitions and like arm wrestling competitions. Because you saw him do the thing with the professional arm wrestler as well. They did like a gimmick thing at one of the arm wrestling pay-per-views.
But now he commands a higher price, right? Because he's
I'm sure.
Okay, so it's worth his while. Because I know he left Strongman because it wasn't making any money at it.
Yeah, but now he can be a guy that they can advertise on the marquee and people will come out to see.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what's next?
Shayna Baszler. I love Shayna personally,
mm-hmm.
but I don't think there was anything left for Shayna to do.
No, and the company has a slew of pretty girls now. They really, and some of which have just as good a chops in terms of being seen as a legitimate fighter as Shayna Baszler. They don't need Shayna Baszler anymore.
There is a specific woman in NXT who I think takes Shayna's spot immediately in Lola Vice.
Right. That's what I was getting at. So where does Shayna go from here? Back to the Indies, or you think she just takes her ball leaves?
Well, given the fact that Ronda Rousey's kind of shown up there and Marina Shafir is gainfully employed by AEW, I would not be surprised to see Shayna end up in AEW.
Ronda Rousey went to AEW?
She did a couple of shots with Ring of Honor.
Oh, okay. So she's not like an active person.
Not current. Yeah. Well, she also just had another kid too. So.
Okay. Yeah, but maybe she'll show up as one of Ronda's goons again.
Or alternatively, it's a way for AEW to entice Ronda to get involved on a more regular basis by hiring the other two horsewomen there. Because I know Jessamyn Duke is available as well still, so you could reunite the four MMA horsewomen in AEW. Since Marina Shafir is already under contract and working with the Death Riders.
Does Jessamyn Duke's legs still go all the way up to her neck?
I couldn't tell you. I haven't seen any pictures of Jessamyn Duke lately.
She was a leggy broad.
Moving forward.
What? She was.
Dakota Kai. This one surprised me.
Has Dakota Kai done anything of note in the last little bit? I mean, the last time I saw her, she was 1/3 of Damage Control, and that was, well, that was 2 plagues and a recession ago.
Damage Control is officially broken up now, especially since Asuka and Kairi are both out hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Asuka had the knee injury. Kairi tore a ligament in her thumb.
Okay.
So Dakota just kind of found herself on the outside looking in when Io Sky's popularity skyrocketed. And then you saw Io put in the performance that Io did at WrestleMania against Rhea and frickin' Bianca.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, Dakota became superfluous.
Yeah, I don't see. Again, they've got so many pretty girls that can do what Dakota Kai did, and they all have working knees.
Speaking of pretty girls and the lack of a women's tag team division to speak of, Kaden Carter and Katana Chance as well.
I don't know what that is.
They were the Rave tag team. Katana Chance is the former Casey Catanzaro from American Ninja Warrior.
Oh, that little girl?
Yes.
I feel like they cut her every year.
Jesus. All right, so now the NXT releases.
Okay.
Cora Jade, as discussed.
Mm-hmm.
Gigi Dolan.
That one legit surprised me. They were just on the NXT pay-per-view.
And Gigi's had talks about possibly moving up to the main roster as well. I think Gigi ends up in TNA with her husband.
Okay. I wonder, do you think she asked for her release for that reason?
No, I don't think she asked for it because she was working with Tatum Paxley, and I think that maybe they see bigger things for Tatum than they do for Gigi. Plus, you got to think about how long Gigi's been doing this too. Priscilla Kelly's been a thing in independent and professional wrestling now for damn near a decade.
How long ago was the tampon incident? 10 years?
Yeah, about that. Coming up on that for sure. So Gigi Dolan, who, like I said, I think she ends up in TNA with her husband. For those who don't know, Priscilla Kelly, Gigi Dolan's married to Zachary Wentz.
Cool. Next.
Eddie Thorpe, which did surprise me because Eddie's been getting a lot of TV time on NXT. He just beat Trick Williams at Stand and Deliver. Or not at Stand and Deliver.
Whoop that trick.
Not at Stand and Deliver, the pay-per-view before, the one that we covered. Vengeance Day.
Yeah. Okay.
So that one kind of surprised me seeing Eddie Thorpe get cut. I think Eddie goes back to.
We had a whole long conversation about that.
I think Eddie goes back to New Japan.
Fair.
Riley Osborne, who apparently had attitude issues, and that's what led to his release. Riley really wasn't doing much of anything, so no big loss there. This is the biggest surprise of all the releases for me, Jakara Jackson.
Why?
Because the Meta Girls were starting to get their footing on the main roster earlier this year. And while I understand that they see Lash Legend as a future star, and with her look, it's understandable to see why they would think that, I think Jakara is the better worker of the two.
Yeah, I don't know if the WWE cares.
Unfortunately, they only see the size and the build for Lash Legend, and that's where they see the money there. And Jakara is kind of left in the background. Because the other... so... Noam Dar returns and wins the Heritage Cup, and Lash Legend's going to start to apparently getting a singles push here. But the other two members of Meta 4, Jakara Jackson and Aura Mensa, both got released.
Okay. Since Backlash is this Saturday, let's quick go through that card again. I don't want to spend too long on this, and then we'll jump into action.
Hold on, I have two more. I have one more set of releases for you before we move on.
Done. You told me you were done.
I did not say I was done. I said that one's the one that surprised me the most, but I didn't say I was done.
Sound like you were done to me.
Gallus got released in whole.
Oh, well, that one doesn't shock me either. Gallus has been with NXT for an ill minute now.
So it does surprise me, and the reason I say that is because they were the guys that were working with The Rock and working with a couple other people as they were coming back from injury. That being said, they don't need to be employees of the WWE to do that. They can be privately financed as freelancers to do that. Same difference.
Did you see the story that's been making the rounds of The Rock? Was asked to basically go home.
Stupid.
Like he's a member of the TKO board, but they don't want him directly involved creatively.
Fucking stupid.
In a talent way with the company anymore because of the bullshit he pulled with WrestleMania.
Fake news. Stupid stories looking for clickbait.
Yeah, that made no sense to me either. I just wanted to get your take on it really quick.
It's clickbait.
Because for a while there, it was like all over my feed. Like, oh, The Rock is fired. And I'm like, he's a board member. No,
yeah, try harder. Somebody needs to tell those article writers to go touch grass.
That's the second time in the last hour I've heard the phrase touch grass.
You might hear it again before we're done here.
Backlash comes to you live on the Cock this Saturday in St. Louis. Because you can find me in St. Louis.
On the Cock, apparently.
Where we do smoke and fuck all day. That is for certain. Speaking of smoking and fucking all day, John Cena, who is currently champion, takes on Randy Orton for what appears to be the zillionth time. For the undisputed WWE Championship, John Cena goes over pretty easily here, probably with shenanigans, but he gets the pin.
So if this match were later in Cena's run, then I'd say Orton had a chance. But the fact that this is the first title defense after Cena won the title at Mania, there's no way Orton wins the belt here. It's
a placeholder. This is something they're doing while they get other people elevated to take on Cena in the back half of 2025. So Randy Orton's, these guys work well together. They've worked together a zillion times. It was an easy match to make. It's not interesting in any way, shape, or form.
The fact that it's in St. Louis adds that to the picture. But other than that, I don't think there's any drama as far as who's winning. The question will be how good is the match and if they still have any of the chemistry that they had back in 2009.
Lyra Valkyria takes on Becky Lynch. What?
Valkyria.
No, I like the way I said it better, jerk. Lyra Valkyrie takes on Stephanie Vader. Lyra Valkyrie. Deal with it.
So now I'm just going to start playing Ride of the Valkyries every time we talk about her.
Good. You've already said it before. Becky Lynch.
Becky over. I think it'll be a really good match.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be a really good match. I think the opportunity for Lyra to show that she can hang with the big dogs in the women's division is there by having her in the ring with Becky. And we already saw her put in a phenomenal performance against Becky for the NXT women's title a couple of months ago, after Becky had beaten Tiffany Stratton for that belt. Right. So
Money's in the chase, and SummerSlam's going to be here before you know it.
See, I think Bayley's the one who takes the belt from Becky, though.
Well, we'll see. Either way, I think they rematch at SummerSlam, and then maybe we move on to Becky versus Bayley for Survivor Series. Pat McAfee takes on Gunther in the only interesting match on this entire card, quite frankly.
So the big thing for me about this match is there's been conversations and apparently reach outs there that Scott Steiner will be in Pat McAfee's corner.
I hope he does
Backlash. Well, did you see his gorilla math comment on Twitter?
No, but I saw his nephew do WrestleMania weekend at the cowboy hat do a Steiner math promo, which I thought was pretty funny.
Make sure you check out Scott's Twitter. He does the whole 100 men versus gorilla trend that's going on crazy there. He does Steiner math about the gorilla, and it's fucking hilarious.
That sounds fantastic.
It is.
All right. Pat McAfee versus Gunther. I mean,
Gunther has to win this.
He does, but I think Pat McAfee gives him a good fight, and if there's boldness, if there's bravery, I think Pat McAfee wears the crimson mask. I think Gunther beats him pillar to post, but he can't put him down, and then finally, kind of like a Steve Austin WrestleMania 13 thing. Pat McAfee just can't go on.
I could definitely see a referee stoppage here. Like he ends up putting McAfee in the choke and ends up choking him out there. And the thing about it is remember what we saw back a couple of months ago when Goldberg showed up, and now they're talking about doing Goldberg's last match, and the June pay-per-view for the WWE, which will be Night of Champions, is in Saudi Arabia, and they love themselves some Goldberg. So don't be surprised if it's Gunther versus Goldberg in Saudi Arabia.
The June pay-per-view is my birthday weekend. It's Money in the Bank. There's
one added later in the month for June.
Oh, is there really?
Yeah.
We're back to 2 pay-per-views in a month.
Unless it's the July pay-per-view. Either way, there's a show coming up in Saudi Arabia later in a couple of months.
I'll look when we're done here.
Fair enough.
All right. So we have Jacob Fatu versus LA Knight. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me talk to you. Yeah. Versus Punishment Martinez versus
Damian Priest.
Versus Drew McIntyre.
Although, it is kind of ironic. I play WWE Supercard. Yeah. And they just did a thing in Supercard where they did like flip edition cards.
Yeah.
And one of the flip edition cards is Damian Priest, and his flip edition is actually a Punishment Martinez card.
That's fantastic. I was doing that during the WrestleMania review. I kept calling everybody by their indie gimmick name.
I'll show you it once we get done on the show.
Okay. Jacob Fatu retains. What do you think?
Yeah, he has to here. If you're going to take the belt off of Fatu, it's going to be a star-making singles performance, not in a multi-man.
Yeah. And then finally we have Dominic Guerrero versus Penta.
See, I am not going to correct you on that because that boy is Eddie's son, and there is no one that can convince me otherwise.
Yeah, that's why I said it. I mean, Dominic goes over here, but I think Penta gives him a good match.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Penta take the title here. I think that the chickens are going to start coming home to roost for Dominic, specifically a certain prince that's upset with him over the way things played out at WrestleMania.
Not at Backlash, though. I'm not good enough for Backlash. Sorry. All right, so
Chris Jericho 2002 after he lost the undisputed title.
Okay, so we have Battleground.
I'm a nerd, forgive me.
We have Backlash in St. Louis on May 10th. We have
Battleground.
We have Saturday night's main event in
and
Tampa,
Battleground.
and Battleground in Tampa, and those are both May 24th and May 25th. Then we have June 7th. We have Worlds Collide and Money in the Bank in Inglewood in the Hood. July 12th is Saturday night's main event, and they haven't listed, at least on the Wikipedia page, they have not listed a July pay-per-view. Though SummerSlam is August 2nd and August 3rd. Clash in Paris is August 31st. Crown Jewel in Australia is October 11th, and then Survivor Series is November 29th. So whatever you're talking about, they have not listed on the Wikipedia page just yet. Why does everyone feel the need to put their phones on the screen? What does that even say?
June 28th in Saudi Arabia, Night of Champions.
Okay, I believe you. Though AIs have a tendency to be wrong, Harry. You have to double check.
I'm not disagreeing with the lack of AI knowledge, because AI seems to think that Chris Jericho was the first WWF champion. I got a good chuckle out of that one, but
all right. So let's get into the reason why we're here tonight, the reason for the season. Action 7. Tell us about Action Wrestling, Harry Broadhurst of the Screaming Boy podcast.
Action Wrestling is a company based out of Tennessee that's been active for 7 years, obviously based on the name there. 2018, kind of a hotbed for Southern independent wrestling. So there's a company up in the Northeast called Beyond Wrestling that did a show called Uncharted Territory, which was kind of the first ever majorly televised weekly independent wrestling show. It would air on IWTV every week. Well, they moved that show down south for season 4 and called it Southeast First. And it was done in association with Action Wrestling. And that was done when former Action Wrestling heavyweight champion AC Mack won the IWTV Heavyweight Championship. AC Mack is, in my opinion, maybe one of the most underrated wrestlers of all time. The dude was a heat magnet. The dude could go like nobody's business. The dude was openly engaging and incredibly easy to talk to. And he has the whole LGBTQ crowd behind him as well, with him being actively married to Rico Gonzalez, another professional wrestler.
All right. So this is their 7th anniversary show? Is that what this
Correct.
was?
Correct.
Okay.
May of 2018 was the first show.
So do you follow their monthly show? Are you well versed in whatever angles they have going on?
I follow the results from every show. I don't always get to watch every show, but I am familiar with a lot of the talent. I am familiar with a lot of the storylines. And their heavyweight champion, who we will get to, is maybe the next guy to keep an eye on from the independent scene.
All right. That's fair. They were running an angle during this show, and one of my criticisms is going into these things cold. Like the commentary team, and it might be because I was distracted, who knows, but from what I recall of my viewing experience, the commentary team didn't do the world's best job of telling new people what the hell they were looking at. But everyone who was there and the wrestlers involved in it were very much deeply involved in whatever the plot line of the story was. I was having a hard time following it.
That's fair. I think a lot of cold people will come into these kind of shows and have that issue. And that's an independent wrestling thing in general, like we've talked about before, that if you're not it goes back to like even the early days of companies like ECW. If you weren't a month in, month out viewer, a month in, month out partaker of the Kool-Aid, then you could easily find yourself disconnected from whatever the goings on happened to be. That is the problem that I think plagues a lot of independent professional wrestling, although they are getting better. And I will say that I do appreciate the fact that they were able to nicely edit everything together in a 2-hour package for Action Wrestling on IWTV as well. And they had the replay up for the show super quick too, compared to
this ended and I was like, oh my God, it was only 2 hours. This isn't a 12-hour fucking game changer wrestling.
Ain't that nonsense. The goddamn truth?
Good Christ almighty. All right, let's get into it. First match listed on cagematch.net. So everyone knows I'm just reading off the website here. We have Slim J, fantastic name, defeated Alan Angels in 7 minutes, 39 seconds. Tell me all about it.
All right, so Slim J is actually kind of a famous name on the indie scene because he was one of the guys that was involved with Special K back in the early days of Ring of Honor.
Mm-hmm.
Alan Angels is just coming off of a run in TNA. And Angels has been kind of, when I mention AC Mack, every villain needs a hero. Mm-hmm. And in Action Wrestling, the villain was AC Mack. The hero at that time was Alan Angels. And they feuded over the Action Heavyweight title for almost 2 years.
Oh, interesting. Okay. What do you think of the match?
The match itself was kind of quick. I was surprised at how sudden it was, but I do think that on an independent wrestling show, when you have a hot opener there where you're getting the guys in, getting them out, getting the crowd hyped up, and then not overstaying your welcome, it does your fan base and it does your viewers a strong favor in keeping them engaged in the product. So I thought it was a little short maybe for what it was, but not surprising that it was kept to a brisk 7 to 8 minutes.
I'm not against the idea of a short match to start your show off. You know, get the crowd in, get them hot, get them ready for the night. These 20-minute openers where it feels like, why are we doing the main event first? Like, unless it's Saturday night's main event at 11 o'clock at night, I don't understand the point.
And going back to what I was saying there too, these are both two guys. Slim J was on the very first Action Wrestling show. Mm-hmm. Alan Angels' debut with the company happened on show number 2.
All right, next match we have the 4-way. Casey Owens defeated Bobby Flacco, Grayson Pierce, and Jamison Shook in less time than the previous match.
So this was all about putting over Casey Owens and the Good Hand, which is kind of like the big heel stable in Action Wrestling right now, led by Shook D, who we'll talk about in our next contest.
Yeah, those guys were all over this show.
Yeah, it's and then you see the major angle coming out that we'll get to as well with the suplex assassin, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. Okay. Jamison Shook is a guy from Pittsburgh who I think has a very bright future, but is still very green. He's still very young into the business. Bobby Flacco is blowing up all over, and personally, I don't understand it. I don't see it. Mm-hmm. I don't dislike him, but I don't think that he's as good as some of his contemporaries, and I don't have an opinion one way or the other on Grayson Pierce.
Okay. Next one is
the tag titles.
The tag titles. You have the Good Hand of Shug D and Tyler Stevens with Casey Owens. Yeah, like I said, these guys were, every time I looked up from my laptop to see what was going on in wrestling, it was all these guys. Defeated Top Team of Jay Lucas and Terry Yaki in 11 minutes and 27 seconds.
So this was not originally supposed to be Top Team as the challengers, and Shug kind of talks about that in his promo before the match. This was actually supposed to be the Good Hand versus the Infantry of Sean Dean and Carly Bravo from AEW. But apparently there was a scheduling conflict. I think there was a Ring of Honor taping that happened that the Infantry was needed for because they're part of Shane Taylor Promotions, and Shane Taylor Promotions is a big thing in ROH currently. Okay. So they were unable to make the action show, hence the Top Team filling in there. Since this was a replacement match, it kind of took me a little bit out of it because at no point did I feel like the Good Hand was in any kind of danger. But it does play very well into what happens next and why what happens next is important.
Well, what happened next, Harry Broadhurst, was Joe Black defeating Alex Kane with Casey Owens, Shug D, Tyler Stevens, Mo, Larry Curly, Happy Sleepy Dopey, Alvin Simon Theodore, and a partridge in a pear tree.
Now I want to watch some Chipmunks. I love me some Chipmunks.
Alvin Simon
Theodore. Do.
I appreciate you not muting me. Not that you could, but still.
I joined you.
Yes, you did. You did the right thing, Harry. Unlike some people I know who thinks that's an opportune time to mute the host.
Nope. I am all about Alvin Simon and Theodore. Anyways, so the big thing to discuss here is the breakup of Alex Kane away from the Good Hand. And
explain why this is a significant event in pro wrestling history.
Well, at least in action wrestling history. Alex Kane is one of the guys in independent wrestling right now. You've seen him in MLW. He's a former MLW heavyweight champion. Did I freeze? Did you freeze? Can you hear me? Shit. Uh-oh. I think we have some technical difficulties. Oh, okay. Mark had a power issue there. He's gonna be back as soon as he can here. So I'll take you guys through the story real quick here. I apologize for the dead air there. So Alex Kane, like I was saying, has kind of become the new guy in independent professional wrestling. He's been heavily involved with Major League Wrestling. He's been around in a bunch of other various promotions. I think he's even shown up a couple of times for AEW as well. But he's one of those guys who definitely has a very bright future. He has a great look. He has incredible in-ring ability. He's a very strong promo. He's a little on the smaller side as far as the Hoss battles go, but he's a big guy by indie wrestling standards, which helps his cause. So With Alex Kane, Joe Black is a new guy to Action Wrestling who I think they said had just debuted the previous month and beat Tank in his debut match. And Tank is like the guy in the southeastern wrestling scene right now. Like anywhere you go, anybody down there, they'll tell you that if there was to be like a godfather of the South, like the guy that's responsible for the wrestling scene in that area, it's considered to be Tank. And then you have him beating Tank last month and then Alex Kane this month. It's two of the biggest names in Action history. So after the match, Shug D and Alex Kane get into a little bit of a disagreement, and then Alex Kane gets into it as well with Tyler Stevens, a.k.a. The Wall, and Casey Owens as well. Shug seemingly has everything at hand and has them back on the same page there when Alex Kane proceeds to chuck Casey Owens and Tyler Stevens across the ring. Tyler Stevens is a big dude by indie standards. He's like 6'8", and Alex Kane hurled him across the ring. It was quite the visual. So, anywho, the reason that I think that this plays an important role going forward here is because you still have the heel tag team champions in the Good Hand and Shug D and Tyler Stevens, as well as Casey Owens, who is kind of like the guy in the undercard right now, too. Like, if Action had a secondary title, you would probably think it would be on a guy like Casey Owens. The Action Heavyweight Champion is also a bad guy in Tim Bosby. So they're a little light on the babyface side of things in Action Wrestling, and we'll talk about that when we get to whom the challenger was for Tim Bosby in the main event for the Action Heavyweight title. So you had a big name and a guy who has some definite name value on the independents joining over to the good guy, the babyface, the fan favorite side of things there, and completely reinvigorating the main event scene in Action Wrestling as we know it. All right, let's see if I can't get any kind of update as far as where Mr. Radulich is. All right. Two other matches on the show. We'll get to them once Mark gets back. A few other things to talk about from the world of wrestling here. I watched Dynamite tonight, so we'll take a quick break here from Action Wrestling until Mark gets back because he has the format in front of him there, and I don't want to stray too far from it. I'm getting a response right now, actually. Okay. I watched Dynamite tonight, and we saw the main event of Samoa Joe and Claudio Castagnoli. And just real quick, I want to talk about that. And what I want to say is it's incredible to me that two guys that I was watching 2 decades ago in Ring of Honor battling each other are still at the top of their respective game and main eventing television shows in the year of our Lord 2025 and doing a very serviceable job of doing so as well. Like they're not going out there and embarrassing themselves like what we were seeing with some of the people when they would leave the WWF to go to WCW just to cash a paycheck. These are two guys who are still super talented in and of their own right, and Joe's now getting ready to challenge Jon Moxley for the AEW Heavyweight Championship next week on Dynamite, and Castagnoli's kind of like a big bad for Moxley. So this was an opportunity to further their storylines there as well, and it made for very interesting television too, with the way that Castagnoli had taken out 2 members of Samoa Joe's entourage in the build to Joe's title match next week. So tonight, Joe kind of took advantage of the situation, and him and Powerhouse Hobbs were able to eliminate Claudio from the scene for the main event for next week, with the heavyweight title being on the line in a steel cage between Moxley and Samoa Joe, which I do think should be a really good match. I'm not the world's biggest AEW fan, but I will say that the Moxley and Joe match does bring me a strong level of intrigue, and I would definitely be tuning in here. So Mark says that he should be back shortly. Hopefully that ends up shorter than expected here, because I think I'm pretty much out of stuff to say at this particular moment. Mark, check. Wish there was a way to pause the broadcast, but I don't think I can do that. I'm not in the studio. I'm just merely talent here. Like if one of the things I do not miss about hosting podcasts, folks, is when things like this would go wrong. Because of when I was doing the reaction, shout out Tony Acero, shout out Liz Puglisi, shout out Rick Bellon, geez Louise, Jimmy Christopher, Tom John, same difference. When stuff like this would happen, when I had the control access to the board and stuff, I would be able to like pause the broadcast and then stop streaming and stop going live. And one of the cool things about doing it back then was we had the ability to do that. But now with us trying to do everything in real time anymore, it makes it a little bit more difficult. I dropped my spinner. Makes it a little bit more difficult in order to kind of break down the show and pause things out and figure things out. Times like this, I wish we had a third host. What else is there from tonight's episode of Dynamite? The MJF Hurt Syndicate stuff seems to be taking an interesting turn, and they just had the Hurt Syndicate shown backstage with a lawyer who seemed to be bringing the idea of somebody up to the Hurt Syndicate. For those of you who don't know, the releases over the course of last Friday were not the first set of releases that the WWE did this year. There was a series of them back in February as well, and those 90 days have just recently expired. And one of the people involved in the first set of releases was a man by the name of Cedric Alexander, who has quite the history with Bobby Lashley, Shelton Benjamin, and MVP. So I wouldn't be surprised if next week on Dynamite, when they do the segment at Breakthrough, I think it's Spring Breakthrough, I believe is the official title for it, or Beach Blast, or whatever they're calling it, something. I think that could be where we end up getting the official on-screen debut in AEW of Cedric Alexander as well, and he ends up becoming the fourth member of the Hurt Syndicate. All right, I vamped for like 5 minutes. I got nothing left here, folks. I'm sorry. We'll just have to edit this out in post. The IndySiders here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. I am Big Sexy. You can see underneath there, right there. I am Harry Broadhurst, a.k.a. HEB the Eagle. You can find me online at HEB the Eagle on Twitter, although I'll admit I don't post often. I was also doing DVD and show reviews for The Chair Shot for a while as well, which I do miss doing and might start doing again if I can find time. There's a lot going on in my personal life right now. I won't bore you all with the details, but if I'm able to start doing those again, I would like to get back to that, because independent wrestling's kind of always been like a passion project of mine. I don't know, for those who don't know my story, I was an independent professional wrestling play-by-play announcer, ring announcer, and backstage interviewer for the better part of a decade. Worked for 6 or 7 different promotions over the course of that decade there. The longest tenure with any of the companies I was with Real Action Pro Wrestling for approximately 6 years as their play-by-play guy. I was the play-by-play guy for High Stakes Battleground Wrestling here in my hometown of Youngstown, Ohio, for about 3 years before the company closed, and got an opportunity to work with a ton of people there. Black Diamond Wrestling down in West Virginia was another one that I was very commonly associated with. I did some work for 5 Star Wrestling as well, and there were a few other odds and ends promotions here and there. There's a couple special shows like Dropkick Diabetes and a couple of benefit shows that I also got an opportunity to do. So independent wrestling has always been kind of a passion project for me. I first got into independent wrestling back in the mid 2000s. I would have been early 20s at the time, watching companies like Shikara, IWA Mid-South, IWA East Coast, CZW, although not as much for CZW. Pro Wrestling Guerrilla was a big watch for me back then, especially shows like the Battle of Los Angeles and the Dynamic Triumvirate, whatever the fuck they called their tag team title tournament shows. Those were always pretty cool to watch too. A lot of early Ring of Honor as well, which is why it pains me to see what Ring of Honor has become in 2025. But at least the archive is still somewhat available on the Honor Club, so I'm able to go back and watch that. I think that's about all I have to say right now. So let's hope Mark gets back here soon. Otherwise, we're going to end up having to put a very, very untidy bow on this show. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the results myself from Cage Match for Action, and I will discuss the other two matches until Mark gets back. And then if he wants to chime in with anything, then he can, just because I don't want to keep things dragging too terribly here. It's been a long day. Little bit of inside baseball here. My stepdad's in the hospital, or he's in rehab now. He was in the hospital for a little over 2 weeks, but so he's doing better than he was, but he's still not great. We went up to visit him today, so it's mentally draining kind of day. But so we were doing the show here, and we were going to wrap things up in a nice little tidy bow. We were going to try to wrap it up in about an hour-ish or so. We're slightly over an hour now, but in fairness, we had a little bit longer intro than we planned with the conversation about Eric Bischoff. Pulling this up right now. Give me 1 second, folks. There it is. All right. Ironically, the match that Mark was most looking forward to discussing is next, with the WXW Unified Heavyweight Championship on the line, as the one called Manders defends against Darian Bankston. And then the main event sees Tim Bosby defend against a unannounced mystery opponent, although that unannounced mystery opponent that he is defending against ends up being somebody whom he has a arguably bigger appointment set up with later in the year as well. So those will be two matches that we're definitely going to want to wait for Mark to get back to discuss. So let's see if I can't find out. I'll get an ETA here, because he said he was trying to work his way back, but he might be locked out. All right. Again, apologies, folks. These things happen on live streams, and it's been a long time since I was doing one of these on a regular basis. And usually I have like a series of sound clips to keep myself entertained, and a series of videos. And okay, so Mark's waiting for Chrome to reboot, so he should be back here momentarily. So I think that that's about all I can give you right now. We need a live chat. I wonder if we can get anybody invested in the live chat. To be fair, I can't really pull up the live chat, so I don't know how much good that would or wouldn't do me. Although we are tagged on the Facebook post. I mean, is there anybody that commented on the Facebook post? Nope. Okay, well, it's worth a shot. I got nothing left to say. And until we get to the final two matches, and I don't want to go through those final two matches, because those are the two matches that Mark wanted to talk about the most, and I don't want to give all my thoughts here and then not be able to like kind of bounce ideas off of him there. We do sincerely apologize for the technical difficulties, everybody. Unfortunately, I think Mark had a power outage that ended up causing his computer to shut down or restart or whatever. So he's still in the process of getting his computer restarted after everything there. That's what he told me in our most recent message there. So, all right. So if you actually do get a chance to watch the show and listen to this, let me ask you guys all a question out there as you watch and you listen to our reviews and stuff. Are there any companies that you would be interested in seeing us cover? Now, do keep in mind that in order for us to be able to cover them, we have to have access to the shows. And there are certain companies, unfortunately Pro Wrestling Guerrilla being one of them, that we just don't have major access to anymore, because I can't justify $17 a month for one company from High Spots. I can't do it. And it's not that I have anything against High Spots. When they had the High Spots Wrestling Network, I was all about it because it was like another version of IWTV that had a bunch of other different cool promotions, CZW, PWG, All American Wrestling out of Chicago, Shimmer, Shine, and a couple other different promotions that were on the High Spots Wrestling Network. So that made it worthwhile to me. Unfortunately, a lot of those back catalogs with the pivot share closing down in 2023, a lot of those back catalogs did not move to the new High Spots TV when it relaunched after pivot share shut down. So unfortunately, if I'm only getting it specifically for Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, I don't think that that's going to be enough to justify a $17 a month charge for Pro Wrestling Guerrilla shows. I still have a bunch of the older shows on DVD, but nothing. I did just watch the 2018 Battle of Los Angeles, so that was really good. But all right, I think that's about all I got. Now I just got to wait for Mark to get back because that's pretty much all I can do at this point, and we'll just have to cut this out in post or something. Okay, so Mark should be on his way back shortly here, so that should work out nicely. He just got Chrome to reboot, so he should be coming back into the show here shortly. Hold on, let me mute the volume on my phone so that way I can see what you guys are saying there. All right, so yeah. But if there's any particular companies that you guys are looking to, curious to find out more about, or curious to see us cover, or curious to see us talk about, or even if it's like classic stuff from some of these promotions too, it doesn't have to be modern stuff. Like one of my things about the IndySiders that I wanted to do when we originally had the idea to do this back a couple of years ago is I wanted to go back into the archives of independent wrestling as well and touch on promotions that maybe people never got the opportunity to see about. Promotions like, admittedly, the somewhat troubled Shikara, now going back into that back catalog, but I have always and will always be a Shikara fan, even if some of the people in there turned into be less than desirable people. Jersey All Pro Wrestling built quite the independent following back in the early 2000s. It's maybe the promotion that got El Generico's Sami Zayn his name here in the United States, coming down from Canada. I know that he started wrestling for CZW around the same time, but the Brainbuster viral clip actually happened at a Jersey All Pro Wrestling show that a lot of people talked about with him. I wouldn't mind doing some old Ring of Honor stuff as well, too, just because I think it would be fun and interesting to go back and see what was and what became for a lot of the people that maybe got to start in Ring of Honor. I will not look forward to the 3-hour run times, a lot of those early Ring of Honor shows, but it would be interesting to go back and kind of see who's who became somebody, who dropped off the face of the earth, who we can still talk about in 2025, because apparently that's a thing nowadays anymore. But all right, Mark should be back shortly, and then we will continue with the final two matches for Action Wrestling 7, the anniversary show from April 26th, 2025 here on the Radulich and Broadcasting and W2M networks. We'll be back momentarily. That delay is not as long as I thought it would be going to YouTube. I'm a little surprised. Hi, everyone. I'm still here. This would normally be the time in the reaction where I would play like commercials and advertisements and songs and stuff. We're going to have to talk to Mark about getting me some advertisements to play if this happens in the future. You are listening to the Radulich Broadcasting Network, a presentation of the W2M Network, or vice versa. Well, I've seen him edit the clips and stuff for TikTok and stuff, so I'm sure he can edit a lot of this stuff out too, like a lot of the dead air. I did what I could, folks. I'm sorry. I'm out of practice. I haven't been doing these much recently. I just started doing podcasts again for the first time in like 3 years a couple of months ago with Mark. Me and Mark started talking again, and I reached out and I asked him, hey, would you have any interest in rebooting the IndySiders? And he's like, he would definitely be interested in rebooting the IndySiders. And one of my things is I always wanted to keep the IndySiders relatively positive too. Like I wanted to focus on, yeah, you're going to get the occasional dud of a show here, and that's going to happen no matter what company you watch, whether you're a fan of WWE, ROH, TNA, going back to WCW, AEW, whatever it happens to be. You're going to get dud shows. It's going to happen. Performers have off days. Announcers have off days. Guys have those moments where they're just not feeling it. The shows just don't come together the way that they should. So, I mean, I'm not going to say that everything's going to be super great, high time, happy fun time or whatever here, but one of my things is I always like to try to see the best in professional wrestling because professional wrestling has given me so much personally. Professional wrestling is one of those things where if you think you're owed something, you're not. If you think that the business owes you something, it doesn't. If you think that you're inherently due, oh, welcome back, Mark. You think that you're inherently owed anything at all from professional wrestling, if you're involved, if you're a fan, if you're whatever it is you happen to be, you don't. You aren't. You won't. Professional wrestling is one of those things that when you least expect it, when you least believe that there's anything left in this business that can surprise you, it surprises you, and it reminds you once again all over why you became a fan in the first place. And that's one of the things I love about it. You picked a hell of a time to come back.
Yeah, apparently I got you mid-rant.
Well, I was just talking about how one of the things that I said was before you made your way back, I was saying that I'm not good at doing the solo stuff anymore because it's been so long since I've done a podcast. Like I used to have to vamp for time and stuff when like Tony would be late getting to the reaction or whenever we would have audio difficulties with the shows and stuff. And I would have to vamp, but I always had like a stack of commercials or like a stack of songs and stuff that I could play to kind of kill time. But one of the things that I've said is one of the main things for us about restarting the IndySiders is I wanted to keep the show relatively positive. Mm-hmm. Because I firmly believe that pro wrestling is kind of what you find from it. You take away what you want to take away from a pro wrestling show. And if you think wrestling, like I was just saying, if you think wrestling owes you anything, it doesn't.
I would agree with that. Well, I appreciate you keeping this going. So my house had a power hit, but it was like a momentary thing, like it flickered, but everything went off. And I have a Mac and I use Chrome. I don't know if anybody else experiences this, but if you turn the power all the way off and restart, especially if there's a sudden loss of power, Chrome takes forever and a few tries to restart again. So it just took me a minute to get everything. Like I had the electricity came back immediately. The Wi-Fi actually came back on shortly thereafter, but then I was just waiting for everything else to reboot on my computer. So I apologize, nothing I could do about it, but I appreciate you being a consummate professional, Harry, and keeping this going.
So, well, we talked about possibly discussing Dynamite. So I did kind of talk a little bit about the main event from tonight's episode of Dynamite going into next week's episode 2. I intentionally saved the last 2 matches from Action Wrestling because I know those were the 2 you wanted to talk about.
Oh, okay. Let me pull that back up.
I have it in front of me. You don't need to. I have it in front of me.
Take the lead, Harry.
WXW Unified Heavyweight Championship is on the line as the one called Manders defends against Darian Bankston. Manders ends up picking up the victory here in just a shade over 14 minutes over Bankston here, but then proceeds to put Bankston over, swearing in front of the family-friendly crowd, but stating that if Bankston ever decides that he wants to try to make a run at a tour of Europe, Manders will have his back because of the performance there. So one of the things that I have issues with independent wrestling is that whole you scratch my back, I scratch your back, quid pro quo stuff there, because a lot of it is just lip service. But Bankston is one of those guys, and I know you'll talk more about Manders because Manders is going to be the guy you're more familiar with. One of the things about Darian Bankston is Bankston's one of those guys from the Southern independent scene who I don't think gets the credit that he deserves. He's very similar to me to a guy that we've discussed in the past named Daniel Makabe, if that name rings a bell.
Somewhat.
And that he was a technical wizard in an area that was not known for professional wrestling until he started being regularly active there. Makabe in the Pacific Northwest. Bankston down south here is kind of a guy who made his name known as being a technical prowess master, as being similar to a vein of like a Dean Malenko in that regard, while still having a little bit of the more modern independent flair about him as well. And I wanted to get your thoughts as far as what you thought of Bankston's performance here, as well as your thoughts on a guy like Steve Manders being able to make a run towards a major promotion overseas in Germany, Westside Extreme Wrestling, as their heavyweight champion, having just won, I don't know if you are aware of this or not, having just won the 16-karat gold tournament in order to win the heavyweight title.
It's a shame Manders is never going to get like a major North American promotion run. I mean, maybe AEW, but he even seems a little old for that. Because Manders looks to me, Manders looks like a main eventer. He looks like a star. He's kind of a throwback to the old style, of a wrestler's build, where he's not overly muscular, but he's a big meaty man slapping meat. And again, he's got a lot of. He doesn't have like the over the top Hulk Hogan kind of charisma. He has kind of a smoldering intensity charisma. You
know who he reminds me of? And feel free to tell me if you think I'm crazy here. I get a lot of Stan Hansen from him.
Yes, that's what I was going. Yeah, he's like, never mind the 80s. He's a very 70s style wrestler, which I appreciate.
He's very Stan Hansen, very not so much with the look, but with the athletic style, very Bruiser Brody-esque too. He's a big brawler, but he can also go in the ring as well when the bell rings. Like the match that he had with Bankston here was very technical for two guys that maybe your casual independent wrestling fan might not know a ton about.
Yeah, I thought this was a really good match. To me, it was the best match on the card. Manders always looks like a star to me. The other guy I don't remember too much about. I appreciate what you're saying about him, but I can't. I can't dispute it or agree with it because I honestly don't remember.
They were beating the shit out of each other with those chops there, and especially when Bankston took off the T-shirt, like the half shirt that he wears.
Yeah.
Like that's some of the loudest chops that I've ever heard in action wrestling, and I've been watching the company going back to some of the earliest shows that the company's ever had.
Yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed this match from what I remember of it. I remember thinking like, oh, this. I thought something I was thinking about, and I'm sure you already covered it. And again, sorry, I had the electrical thing, but. One of the things I noticed about this was a lot of indie wrestling seems like they looked at what worked in the WWE and tried to do it themselves. And sometimes the reasons why things work in the WWE is because they are done on the big stage and they don't work nearly as well as on the small stage. One thing I remember early on in the show, there was a bit where I can't remember the guy's name, but probably Shug. It was the tall black guy with the long braids. And
Shug.
Yeah, and they did the thing where somebody was behind him and he knew somebody was behind him, but he does like the wide-eyed, oh no. And I'm like, yeah, that works when it's the Undertaker. when you're doing it with Eddie O. Schmo, it doesn't work nearly as well.
You're referring to when Alex Kane threw Casey Owens and Tyler Stevens across the ring and Shug was like, oh shit, I'm next.
Yeah, but his back was to him.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, so he doesn't know what's happening, but because again they've done this with the Undertaker, and it always gets over. But again, it works with the Undertaker because the Undertaker is supposed to be like a supernatural horror monster. It doesn't work with any old schmo. That being said, just to kind of finish up, because I do want to get to the end of this shortly. I thought the Manders match was really, really good, best match of the show, and I wish Manders were maybe a little bit younger, and that somebody would bring him to the big show, because I think he deserves it.
Interesting fact that I don't know if you're aware of. Did you know who Manders is dating?
No.
Sawyer Wreck.
Cool.
The girl who used to do the death matches for GCW.
Oh, really? Oh, what a lovely pair they must make. All right, last match.
It's a choice.
Yes. We all need love, Harry. We all need love. We are social creatures.
No arguments here. Your main event sees Tim Bosby with Dylan Hales defending the Action Wrestling Spinner Belt, which, okay, heel, I guess.
We're about 20 years too late, but sure. Did I mention something about this only works on the big stage?
I thought the Spinner Belt was hilarious just because of the fact that it was Dylan Hales being a douchebag, but
it's a 20-year-old joke. John Cena became champion the year I moved to Florida. It was 2005.
It was the year I turned 20, actually.
Ugh. Go on.
I'm significantly younger than you, I am aware. Anyways, he defends the Action Wrestling Heavyweight Championship against a mystery opponent who ends up being the Atrocity Cruel. Now, one of the things that I did tease while you were gone here is that this is actually a setup for a much bigger match between these two to come, and something that I do want to discuss with you that I do think we should cover later this year.
Okay.
And the commentary team kind of talked about it here, and I do think you'd be interested in doing this. Do you remember the Battle Los Angeles, the Ted Petty Invitational, the big independent tournaments? Well, the South has their own version of that called the Scenic City Invitational. July 18th and 19th of this year. And one of the first round matches will be Tim Bosby versus Cruel.
Cool.
So you see kind of the seeds being laid for that match in the first round here in this contest, which does see Tim Bosby retain the Action Wrestling Championship when Big Dave, who he had been feuding with in New South Pro Wrestling, which is another one of those shows that's in that general vicinity down south there, tries to hit Bosby with the New South Heavyweight title. Bosby ducks, and Big Dave ends up hitting Cruel instead, and that leads to the pinfall for Bosby. So I'll let you talk about Cruel, because I know you've got kind of a man crush on the guy.
No, I honestly don't have a whole lot to say here. So I was actually gonna throw it back to you. What did you think of the show overall?
Real quick for Bosby. Bosby is a guy who is only 2 years into the business. Has an amateur background, maybe not to the level of the guy that I'm about to compare him to, but he reminds me a lot of a very early into the business Kurt Angle.
Yeah, I can see that.
The amateur athleticism, the suplexes, the chicken shit heel tendencies as well that he displays despite being champion. The fact that he's relying on a guy like Dylan Hales, who is very similar to a Tank that I talked about while you were gone, as kind of a godfather of the South, a guy who's had his hands in a lot of the goings on in Southern independent wrestling. Tank is very similar in that way. And then Dylan Hales is another guy who you see all over that area there, just because of the fact that his hands have been in so many different promotions down south, down towards Southeast First, Southern Underground Pro, Action Wrestling, Tennessee Wrestling Experience out of Chattanooga, Red Bank Wrestling. There's so many different companies that Dylan Hales has had a hand in. You see his influence all over the area down there.
All right. What do you think of the show, Harry?
Overall, I thought the show was pretty good and timely as well. I appreciate an independent show that can get in and get out in about 2.5 hours.
Yeah,
and edit it out for entrances and stuff. Managed to get in and get out in about 2 hours.
Yeah, this felt like a night, like a weekly television taping kind of a thing. Kind of the way it was shot and their presentation. It kind of reminded me of the TNA, not TNA, the NWA show.
Power.
Yeah, it reminded me of an NWA Power show.
So here's my big negative takeaway from the show. And I know I said we try to stay positive on this show. So this is my one big negative takeaway here.
Mm-hmm.
They have to do something about the sound in that building, because hearing the commentators echoing in the microphone and on the outside of it was giving me a migraine.
All right, that is our review of Action 7 and our look at pro wrestling for the week. I don't have my calendar up, but I did talk about Worlds Collide and Money in the Bank being at the beginning of June. It's my birthday weekend, and I'm thinking we should talk Worlds Collide next.
The NXT versus AAA show?
Yeah.
I think that would be an excellent place for us to go.
All right, so we'll do that. We'll pick a date shortly once we're off the air. Again, I don't have my calendar up because my whole computer crashed. I just don't feel like pulling up extra pages right now. But I will tell you that on Monday, myself, Robert, and David Wright attempted to review Thunderbolts. It was a rather contentious show. Tomorrow, Jason Teasley will be on with me to discuss the final season of You. It's fine. Here's my preview. Sunday night, after all the Mother's Day festivities have died down, Pat Mullen will be on. We're going to talk Havoc, the new movie on Netflix, and he's going to bring a whole bunch of gimmickry to discuss this thing. He's got scales and all kinds of stuff he wants to do. So that'll be that. On Monday, I'm taking a break from Damn You Hollywood and Robert, and I'm going to do a triple feature with Mick and Mac Kenter. And we are going to do some three streaming movies. Nana's Summer of '69 on Hulu, and One of Them Days, which is pretty funny. That came out in January. It was a bit of a hit. I think it made decent money. It was shot on a shoestring budget. It was a kind of a throwback to the comedies of yore, just with two young black girls instead of two old white guys that may or may not have been on SNL. Yes, Harry.
You mentioned the streaming stuff. I know you guys did a review for it in the archives. Real quick, can you give me a quick synopsis of the streaming movie that Will Ferrell did with
with Cutie Patootie, Reese Witherspoon.
Yes.
Yeah.
The wedding movie.
Yeah, you're cordially invited. Basically, you have two different families who are accidentally booked on the same day at the same venue, and the venue can only do one wedding at a time. But they attempt to share the venue and just sort of stagger the events on it so they don't have to cancel a wedding. But because this is one of those situational third-person cringe comedy embarrassment movies, bad stuff keeps happening and it goes to a fever pitch, but it all gets resolved in the end, and there's a happy ending. So it wasn't my favorite of the three, but it's worth a watch.
My girlfriend wants to see it, and I feel like most things Will Ferrell are worth at least one view.
If you like Will Ferrell's brand of comedy and you think Reese Witherspoon's hot and you want a banger, it's worth watching.
Which is why you watched it, Cutie Patootie, Reese Witherspoon.
God damn, her and Kirsten Dunst, man, the powers of pain of blonde cutie patooties.
I'm legally out of here at this point.
So anyway, and then a week from tomorrow is West Wing season 5, which I am like halfway through now. So yeah, we'll be back in the month of June shortly after my birthday to discuss Worlds Collide and whatever else is going on in the world of wrestling. Harry Broadhurst, any last words?
I already said what I needed to say while you were gone. I had to carry about 20 minutes by myself. Please don't ever make me do that again.
Blame Tico. I don't know what you want from me. In Chrome. Fucking Google. Magnets, how do they work? We will. Be safe.
These goddamn juggalos.
And behave.